The recording is started. We can begin.
Perfect. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome everyone to today's Big Data AI Hub seminar entitled Artificial Intelligence for Sustainability, Applications for Access to Justice and Financial Inclusion. The purpose of our seminar series is to connect researchers, industry professionals, and students to discuss the latest developments and challenges in big data and AI. It's my pleasure to introduce John Aikman, a distinguished leader and innovator with a rare blend of expertise in AI, finance, and law. As the founder of Nordy AI Analytics and Matrix Law, and an adjunct faculty member at Queen's and Cornell, John brings a wealth of knowledge from teaching advanced courses to managing award-winning portfolios. His educational background includes a law degree, an MBA from the University of Oxford, and an advanced certifications in AI and fintech from MIT, highlighting a career dedicated to impactful technological solutions. Today, John invites us to explore how AI can be a catalyst for good, focusing on sustainable development, financial inclusion, and access to justice. This session is designed to inspire us to think beyond conventional applications of AI and consider how we, as a community, can leverage technology for greater societal benefit. Please join me in welcoming John as we embark on our journey to discover how we can harness AI for a better future. John, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. So I'm happy to answer any questions as you go along. I'll try and spot if you put your hand up to ask any questions you want, or at the end we'll have other time to connect. So I'll tell you my journey, and I'll tell you what I'm interested in looking at now, and why I think it matters that we get this right. That there are obviously massive potentials for AI, but also at the same time, where we're making these massive breakthroughs, it's clear that we have major challenges with the world, with the environment, with social issues, and injustice, and then basic things like financial inclusion. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. So again, thank you for the kind introduction, and we'll go from there. Let's see. So the outline was AI is powerful. It can do lots of things efficiently. It can detect patterns that are really hard, if it's totally impossible for people to detect on their own. But how do we harness that to achieve really important goals that we have? Fairness and justice. If we've created a world that is technologically efficient, but we lack justice, we lack fairness, or if we don't live in a sustainable world, in that the environment is poisonous, that our lakes are filled with plastics that poison us and cause all sorts of diseases, then we've failed, and was my view. And so looking at the connection between some of the problems we're facing and utilizing these new tools for that. I'm not going to ask you to do any coding or anything. In fact, I would suggest to you that being familiar with no-code or low-code alternatives to solve some of these problems is really a good idea for students and professionals that are operating as well. So with that, basically I'll talk about a little bit briefly my biography, basics of AI, give you access to a tool if you want to look at that, and then talk about sustainability, like the SDGs. How do we make an impact? What is material? And then look at, okay, well, what are the challenges we want to tackle in terms of financial access to justice? And then think about your own application. How can you create a feasibility plan? How can you create a project that is feasible? And we'll talk a little bit about what that would look like. I'll tell you a little bit about some of the things that I work on and that I think are important, but the idea here is not really for me to achieve my goals. It's really to allow you to achieve your goals for your institution, for your university, for your career, for yourself. Right? So again, briefly, this is my background. Some of the other things that I do that I don't talk about is sitting on investment committees. So I sit on a couple of investment committees for pensions and endowments and different foundations, things like that. And also I have a background working on kind of public policy to face some of the big problems in the financial industry. So that led me to participating in a working group at the Federal Reserve of Chicago, and also applying some of this knowledge to investment decisions and within Nordei Analytics, and looking at consulting to help achieve better results for investors or institutional investors. So with that, that's me, that's my background. I have a weird background, but surprisingly, it's kind of connected the dots. I couldn't have planned it going forward, but maybe some of you will find that in your careers, that if you keep advancing, keep learning, you'll find yourself on a different path. As no one would really have been able to tell you that, oh yes, doing your MBA and getting your law degree, working in an investment bank in England would lead you to focusing on tackling problems with AI and fintech. I spent a lot of time with machine learning engineers and others like that. But it's very important, not just that we have data and we use it to get insights, but that we do use it in a meaningful way. Sometimes the meaning is from an economic perspective, and other times it's, hey, we have to solve a particular problem, right? This is one of the tools that you may want to have a look at for yourself. If you are a student, you can get free access to this with RapidMiner. Altair now is something to think about, and it's something to play with. It's an interesting platform. It doesn't require coding, and it can allow you to gain insights from very complicated data sets using the machine learning tools that they have in there. There are lots of others. I find this one is a useful one, and kind of an interesting application for you to kind of play around with. So hopefully that's useful for you going forward, and that's something that you can get free access to for a year. With that, anyone know what this is? In the name of this picture? Something unusual about this picture. This is the first picture of Earth not taken on Earth. I'm sorry, so someone came up with Earthrise. You got it, Pam. Good job. It is Earthrise, and Rob got it too. And it's Earthrise. And it's very unique. This is something to think about. So Earthrise was this unbelievable sea change in our thinking. We suddenly realized that we're this marble floating in the universe, and that we have limited resources. We have to think about things in a certain way, not as we can't have unending growth forever. We have to be thoughtful and think about sustainability, and how do we live in a planet that is good and clean and has all the features that we want for a good life, right? This is the interesting part. What was the technology that allowed this picture to come forward? The technology was the Apollo guidance system. Now think about this. The Apollo guidance system had 4 kilobytes of RAM, 2 megahertz of power, and the computer that I'm operating on has 12 gigabytes RAM and 2.7 gigahertz. So imagine the orders of magnitude larger in power in terms of computing power. If something as simple as your calculator has more power than the Apollo guidance system, but it could take us to the moon. It could take us to all these different places. Remember that, hey, no country on earth had the computing power that's currently sitting in my office right now. So what can we do with this power? Where's it going to lead us to? Remembering that AI is this subset of science and engineering, data science, and all these new developments that started long ago, really to solve a problem. And when you look at the original idea of what was the origin of AI, why did they need to create AI? It was we were faced with a problem that we couldn't solve with the human mind. So we looked at the concept of Turing's general computation machine. We needed something that could think faster than a human and could understand and break the code in a faster way. So the problem that they had was that, you have this 159 trillion possible settings on this machine. You only have a limited amount of time in the day, so you have 86,400 seconds per day. That meant that you'd have to check, trillions and trillions of different settings. It became an impossible task, but ultimately, through using computer systems, the original kind of AI systems, we were able to break the code. We've used the machine learning tools in a variety of different ways. Everything from the creation of the new vaccines, irrespective of whether you are for or against it, you have to respect the fact that these vaccines were created literally within 2 weeks of really getting access to the COVID vaccine. Getting the COVID, the genome to be able to create the vaccines, they were ready to go within 2 weeks. And that would not have been possible without the advances in AI. And then we get to the large language models that are dominating today. ChatGPT, super powerful, but also more than that, we've got Gemini and others that are coming out now. Now, this was just a question that I posed for ChatGPT, and I don't want to run ChatGPT right now, but I'm even misspelled this. But think about this: write a letter like a letter for a dog bite. Amazing. It came up with a very reasonable response within seconds. This is what it came up with. This is a demand letter, demand payment of medical damages suffered to a dog bite for our client. And it even puts in square brackets to do this. So this is a huge change in the power of AI and the applications in different areas that gives people a lot more power. It gives people the power to make mistakes too. And it's not to say that this is perfect by any stretch. And we do have the challenges of hallucination. We have the problem of, relying upon the bad data, of biased data, and the ethics associated with that. But it is breathtaking, the power of this new technology now. So when we're thinking about AI, for some of you who are advanced, you'll have to forgive me for this. AI is, the AI basics are the process of automation, getting cognitive insight, cognitive engagement, and we can use AI in a variety of different tasks to create efficiencies and potentially to unlock value, unlock realizations that maybe we couldn't have seen without that. If I gave you the task of figuring out how 5 different factors are related to, 5 different features are related to each other in a complicated data set, that would be beyond hopeless. That would take you your entire your entire year, probably your entire 4 years trying to figure that out with an Excel spreadsheet. You just would never be able to do it. It's hard enough to do it with 2 factors. And if we look back historically, our thinking about things like investments and finance really dictated by 2 kind of concepts of risk and return. But now that we know that there are so many other factors, so many other features that we can look into, we have this interesting opportunity to gain much greater insights by using AI to do that and make lots and lots of breakthroughs. Lots and lots of breakthroughs are coming in just about every area you can think of, whether that's pharmaceuticals, medicine, general health and well-being, cognitive insights, how people think about things, how people vote, political issues. You can gain really profound insights now as a result of that. So what have we been using AI for? AI does mean a lot of things to a lot of people. everything from, your Roomba to, the sorter for mail, looking for spam filters, banking. One of the first applications of AI that has been around since really the 80s was related to identification of fraud, identification of strange transactions, unusual things. There was kind of a sea change in the banking and what people were looking for, because they, typically the idea was, hey, I'm the expert and I will tell you what the issue is, and then you go out, computer programmer, and you try and identify this. We're looking for this problem, and the power of it became not necessarily relying on the experts, but that the experts were not aware of some of the real problems, that there were insights to be gained from it that that the experts just didn't know about. There are a variety of different financial problems that, in fact, are correlated in very strange ways with things that people think aren't important. Meaning, like, sometimes timing. Imagine that transaction, you're looking for bad transactions, and sometimes you would be looking at it to say, when did that happen? How quickly did that happen? How quickly were the directions sent? Now, that might not be something that someone would think about, but actually that's very, very important, because a human can only operate as fast as their neurons can fire. So if you see something happening on a digital time frame, you can be guaranteed that, in fact, what you're dealing with is a computer and not an individual, which would then mean, hey, the system's been hacked and this is a real red flag. These are just examples of clear issues. But the real insight is not just that we can kind of get the AI to gain insights into things that we know are happening, but to even recognize that there are things that we don't even know that are really happening, that we have to be open to the idea that these AI systems can detect things that we're just simply not aware of. And that can give us a great opportunity to identify risks, or to then on the other side identify opportunities for, maybe there's a real opportunity to do some good in some way, or to have an economic result for this. So again, we end up with a lot of risks and benefits of AI. There are different challenges to identify. When we're thinking about sustainability issues, we have to be aware of the issues of bias, of implementation problems. And I'll tell you an example that I was working with a bank in a certain jurisdiction that I won't tell you about, and a set of banks that were automating certain processes, and the processes that they were automating was the default procedure for people who had missed payments, and they wanted it to be a more systematic approach to that, to identify what was going on, to identify high-risk customers and be able to default them kind of on an earlier time frame, rather than taking the delay for an individual to review it in the normal way. But they wanted to speed this process, to deal with difficult accounts. That's more important. That's really important from the perspective of today. You have really big problems today with rising rates, with increasing defaults, with a lot of leverage in the system. So you can see that decision could really impact a lot of people, a lot of businesses, a lot of jobs, and something that is a very important decision. So think about this. They were going to automate this system of defaulting them, and this was in a country where they didn't have civil and criminal courts. So in fact, the default procedure in that situation was that you go and swear out a warrant for the person to be arrested. And so it would have been this automated system of getting people arrested and thrown in jail. But the question would be, do you want an automated system? Do you want an automated AI-based system that will do this process for you, or implement this process? Because then effectively what you're doing is What if someone is sick? What if someone has a reasonable explanation? What if they're traveling outside of the country and then all of a sudden there's an innocent mistake, or maybe your mail got lost to them. They thought they had paid something off, and then all of a sudden you're going to default them. Imagine defaulting someone with having them thrown in jail for a very small amount of money. And so it just meant that, look, there's a real great potential here, but if we utilize it in the wrong way, significant risks associated with that. So when we're thinking about AI, what are the things that we have to think about for AI? We have to have these components to think about looking at a project for in general. We need lots and lots of data. We have to have the right technology. So the platform like RapidMiner or DataRobot or lots of these other platforms are really great. You also need to have the talents, and one of the most important points is the problem clearly defined so that it can be solved, and you need a net measurable result to understand what that looks like. But recognize that AI is really about identification of complex systems, complex correlations that are beyond the capacity of humans to really put it together. Most of it is driven by data. So what's happening with data? So think about that. AI is driven by data. It will be driven by data and devices. So think about your old car, your old telephone, your old watch. Now we're being replaced by some of these really powerful tools that are collecting massive amounts of data. So this leading to obviously Amazon, Facebook, and Google creating a huge amount of data. So just put it in perspective. How much has data changed in the last, since 2005? What do you think? How much more data do we have today than we had before? And if your answer is a lot, that's true. But just how much? Like, let's look at this. Think about this. A byte is a single character, letter A, right? A kilobyte, short story. Megabyte, small novel. Gigabyte, a pickup truck filled with paper. Huge amount is a gigabyte. Terabyte, 10% of the printed collection of the U.S. Library of Congress. U.S. Library of Congress is massive, right? A petabyte is all U.S. academic research libraries. An exabyte, 20% of all words ever spoken by human beings. So just think about that. Where are we? So 2005, there was a total of 130 exabytes of data up to 2005. So all these new technologies work together, the web, Internet of Things, data storage, cloud computing, the increase in sensors, increase of capture of this. Your phone, smartphones are capturing massive amounts of data. All the apps you use, they're collecting data 24 hours a day. So what does it look like? Well, in fact, it's exploded. The amount of data has absolutely exploded. And now we are left with, the trajectory, and these are all just predictions, but you're looking at about 160,000 exabytes of data in the next year or so. Well, there's an issue with that about the future and where that's going to go to, whether it keeps going on this exponential increase or whether in fact it tops out, because we simply don't have the ability to capture much more data, and then we're going to have a problem of just too much data to think about. So for us, the wonderful part is when we're thinking about, what are the tools we need for this AI project? We need to focus on the basic problem is the corpus, or the data set that we want to look at. So Google's corpus was the internet and looking at websites. So they were trying to categorize and make websites easy to search. That's the Google search algorithm, one of the most valuable algorithms in the world, created by Jeffrey Hitchen at the University of Toronto, sold to Google as the basis of their really powerful search engine. So the corpus, what are we thinking? We have to figure out, well, what data do we have? You thinking about sustainability, or how do you do this? Lots of government data sources, right? Canada, the EU. The EU has a massive amount. The US has lots of stuff. Canada has both, there are different, sector kind of data sets. So CDAR is for the equity markets. You have StatsCan with lots of information. Ontario, the different provinces have a huge amount of data. The provincial data sets tend to be pretty weak in Canada. The US vastly better. Many countries are better. But we're kind of behind in the kind of open government and the data collection there. But some of the data sets are gigantic, right? And then we have private data sets as well. So you can look at, everything from, Google Finance, Quandl, Bloomberg, NASDAQ, Kaggle has lots, Data World, lots of things like that. Just lots and lots of data sets. So NASDAQ acquired Quandl, you can get access to a variety of different data sets. If you want to create your own data set, so imagine you were thinking, oh, well, I want to solve this problem and I want to collect my own data. You have to think about sensors, right? And thinking about sensors to tell you something, whether that's just a cookie that's going to tell you, hey, how does this person search the internet? You can have responses to online questionnaires and things like that. You can also have things that are measured with devices, right? Your phone measures the orientation of the phone. It also has a sound. It has pressure sensors. You have a variety of different sensors to think about within very common tools that you're all walking around with right now. And again, visual, like now with like Nest cameras, and I don't know whether this will play, but this was just trying to detect what was happening with this. This was a back of a house, and someone was trying to figure out what is going on with this basket and what is involved in there. And sure enough, hopefully you can see that. But there was a cat and a family of cats living in there. So the question was, why? Why was that happening? I mean, the thing about that the interesting part about that is that visual sensor was able to detect movement in a particular location or a change on it, and that was able to detect. Well, imagine you if you wanted to really figure that out, you might have to stay up all night, whereas now you could just set up a camera to focus on that for one particular area, detect and record just for that 30-second period of time where you wanted to figure out what's going on. So massively powerful aspect to do that. These are the things that we need up for kind of AI projects in general to think about. So what are we going to do? Why does this matter for sustainability? Well, if we have these powerful tools, but we don't live in a sustainable planet, we don't achieve our sustainability goals, then does it really matter? Or have we created kind of a technological nightmare, right? Where we are kind of forced into utilizing technology, but maybe the technology is not good for us. Maybe we don't live better lives as a result of that. So thinking about sustainability is important. Thinking about what kind of planet we want to have, what kind of culture, what kind of community we want to live in is important. And so one of the biggest ones to think about is we're thinking about sustainability. Well, what do we really mean by that, right? What do we mean by a sustainable development goal? Well, there are lots of them, in fact, and it's being led by, what are they? Well, the United Nations of all people. So with that, think about this, the SDGs, to think about this. Lots of different things for us to think about. We have lots and lots of sustainable development goals. Each, and governments have signed up for this. Ontario, Canada signed up to this. Many nations around the globe. I think the number is now close to 220 or so nations and states and entities have now signed up to these sustainable development goals. Some of the key dates for us to think about: 2030 and 2050. 2030 is kind of a focus for, it's going to be a report card on where we are with many of these things that we're looking at. So sustainability matters. What are the things we're thinking about for sustainability? No poverty, zero hunger, health and well-being, education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy. Many of these are very important to us. Climate action, think about that. Climate action number 13, responsible consumption and production, sustainable cities and communities, reduced inequalities, life below water. Breathtaking to think about the disasters that are happening with respect to the environment and plastics in the ocean. So we have a total of 7 mega plastic islands on planet Earth, the largest of which is larger than Texas in the Pacific Ocean. So that's an artifact of a historical challenge of why do we have so many plastics in the ocean? Well, plastics very important for lots of consumer products, packaging that lead to waste. And waste, where are many nations focusing their attention? Well, they're getting rid of their waste by dumping it in the ocean, right? There are many nations that have been doing that for decades. And that leads to these massive common problems. So you think about that, why does that matter? Why does technology change us? Think about this. If you were transporting between England and Canada, and you were doing trade, you were in the 1940s or 50s, the boat size, the big boat that would be carrying containers or carrying goods would probably fill 5 or 6 containers. And that trip would take a certain period of time, and that was trade and how it worked for really centuries. Those are really big boats, and that was the basis of trade. We suddenly changed that. So how did it change? Does anyone remember the Evergreen that blocked the Suez Canal? How many containers were on the Evergreen? There are about 24,000 containers on the Evergreen. So think about the orders of magnitude larger the transportation is. So it blocks the Suez Canal. Of course it blocks it. Crashed into the side. Of course, it's a city, right? It's not a boat. There are many of those transporting goods all around the world, all being wrapped in plastics, all doing that. So then think about this. When in the age of the Blue Nose, or these boats, these old wooden ships that would transport things, they're big boats, but they're minuscule by comparison to the current day transportation. So what does that really mean? What it means is that our laws were designed in the 1800s. The law of the sea, which is just recently they're thinking about changing and updating, was really that our territorial waters are really 10 miles off the coast, right? You have a very limited amount of responsibility for these common areas, the common oceans, right? And so what did it allow people to do? It allowed to say, well, if you imagine how much waste you could throw off of a small, the wooden boats, very little. But if you're thinking about dropping massive amounts of waste off these gigantic boats, these gigantic mega transportation cities on a boat. I mean, that's different. And so that's why we're left with this problem of the law didn't catch up, our policies didn't catch up with the technology, right? So thinking about sustainability, we have to think about it not just from the perspective of, hey, let's have these good goals, let's have a good policy, but where does this fit in with our laws? Where does this fit in with how things work and what people are responsible for to make people accountable? A couple of really important areas to think about: financial access. Financial access, there is no, if you look at this list, there is no list that says, where's financial access as a sustainability goal? But it is. It really is, and it's really core. Because if you have a huge problem with poverty, people living in poverty, all of these are impacted. People who live in poverty are hungry. They do not get good education. They do not have good health. They suffer from inequalities. They don't have access to justice. They don't have clean water. They don't often have clean energy. They don't get decent jobs or growth. They don't innovate. There are huge problems with it. So financial access, and I've just highlighted some of the financial access issues where these SDGs are directly related to financial access. They're all indirectly related, but these are directly on point. And then we think, okay, well, why do you think access to justice matters? Why does access to justice, or financial access is, hey, if you don't have financial access, then think about trying to send your child to school or to get them to university or to try and buy a home or to try and, build a business, try and get enough so that you can just have a small business, get the financing you need for that. You just won't be able to do it. What's the problem with that? It leads to all sorts of negative consequences, like you're forced into loan sharking and borrowing money from criminal elements and doing bad things for money that otherwise generally honest people wouldn't do, because they're forced to because of their financial needs, and they want to have a good life, they want to have a good education, they want their children to do that, and they're being denied access to that. So it has a real impact. And it also and the people that are providing some of that financing are the criminal organizations that are involved in drugs and corruption and money laundering and a variety of other negative areas. So access to justice, very, very important as well. Access to justice is more important. Just something to think about. And I'm cognizant of the time. I'm rambling on here. Access to justice is super important as well. If we live in a world where people don't feel that they get a fair shake, then we have a big problem. We have a big problem because then your politics become much more polemical, much more extreme, and it leads to a variety of other problems. If you don't feel like there's a fair deal, access to justice, and the majority of people on Earth do not have reasonable access to justice just because of their economic situation. So again, when we're thinking about how do we implement some of these things, the way I think about it is, how do we invest? Whether we're investing money or whether we're investing the capital aspect of it or whether we're investing our labor into that, there's a clear focus on developing impact investments. So not just investments that come up with a financial result, but also have this other non-economic aspect. And I can tell you that it's a really hot topic and a big area. Working within the investment world and sitting on investment committees, it's very important to think about these things. It's very important to think what is appropriate and what's not appropriate. Meaning, it could just be political. It's not just about voting with your political with your affinity. It's really more than that. It's really focusing on, how do I make sure that I'm being a good fiduciary, being a good investor for the future, and at the same time we want to achieve some of these important non-economic aspects. So think about this. So impact investments, how do we achieve both the financial returns as well as some of the other things that we care about? And we can have different types of impact investors fall into this category of someone who wants to achieve something that is not just purely financial returns, but that they want to achieve something. So there are many investment funds that are investing that they want to reduce the carbon footprint of their portfolio, that they want to achieve certain sustainable goals, and they'll state that in their documents. So investors are becoming much more sophisticated in thinking about this. You can have impact only, but the one issue that you would think about is it's very easy to move from being an impact investor into just a pure charity, like where you're not really concerned about getting a market return. You just want to foster the development of a particular community. And I've been a part of that as well, where you're trying to advance, a certain community to give them access to capital so that they could start their business. Whether that's, there are clear benefits to many communities by investing in women-led companies. Well, there's lots of evidence to suggest that they spread the wealth around more, they hire people, they are much more kind of collaborative in how they operate, and they bring a lot of value to communities by having women-owned businesses. But we have to think about what matters. If we want to make an impact, if you want to make an impact and think about, hey, how do I use this AI to achieve this result? You really have to think about what matters. Man, this is LendingTree. And so when we look at this and the way that this works, in terms of the investment area, and thinking about this from some of the big organizations, whether that's SASB or some of the larger organizations that focus on what matters here. So the question would be, hey, is this a good investment? Is this a good business? And think about what LendingTree does. LendingTree's idea, similar to other firms like Prosper and others, these platforms for online lending, the idea was that they were looking at a broken system. And the broken system in finance was that banks could borrow at the risk-free rate, but that the majority of people, majority of businesses could only borrow at kind of credit card type level. So many businesses operate financing through very expensive capital, credit card level, 22, 25, 30% interest rates, and they use that for their working capital. So there are very few businesses that actually can sustain that level of economic stress. So LendingTree comes in and says, look, we will offer, if the bank rate is 5 and the credit card rate is 25, we will lend to you at 15, come in the middle, and they would allow people this access to lend to that. So that was the good idea for that, was it allowed people the access to provide their capital, and on the other side, the users of capital were happy to get a cheaper capital for their businesses typically. So then we have to think about, well, what is material for us to think about this? What is the issue we want to deal with? And it breaks down, right? Materiality. What are the issues, the general issues we can think about? The environment, social capital, human capital, the business model and innovation, leadership and governance. All these different things are criteria. But guess what? They don't all apply to each business. According to SASB and others, then what's material? Imagine we've thought about materiality. We can see this, and to look at it to say, okay, well, if you're apparel, you have appliance manufacturing, you have, e-commerce. So we would fit this. We try to think about LendingTree is really e-commerce in a way. It's what they do. So what matters for them? Well, energy management matters. Customer privacy, data security, employee engagement, diversity and inclusion, product design, and lifestyle management. Something to think about. So when we think about that, these are the areas that they would have flagged as being material. So when we're thinking about, hey, I want to have an impact, I want to have a sustainable impact, what do we really think we're talking about? Well, it does break down to ESG. And when we're thinking about climate change, greenhouse gas emissions, pollution, depletion, and ecosystem deterioration, one of the most important ones, water intensity and scarcity. Water intensity, interestingly, when you find yourself focusing on a particular SDG, like access to clean water, you actually find yourself very quickly talking about other goals as well, clean energy. Some of the most important considerations for clean water is how do you clean it? What's the cost of doing that? In fact, it is massively energy intensive. many towns, municipalities, and governments, the largest cost to them is on creating clean water for their populations. The largest energy spent, in fact, is. So these are things to think about. And then we also have social issues to think about: product safety, employee relations, human rights, cybersecurity, all these other, and then the G with the corporate governance to think about a variety of different things like that. So with these are the kind of considerations we have, and how does this turn around and get to us for financial access? 1.2 billion adults don't have a bank account in the world. It leads to a ton of different problems: lack of access, lack of home ownership. And you say, well, why does home ownership matter? Why does home ownership matter? From a social perspective, governments want owners of homes. Why do they want that? Homeowners pay more taxes, they have lower crime rates, they have a huge number of benefits for your community when you have a higher ownership rate rather than a lower ownership rate. People care more about their community. They invest more in it to build something. So it is something from a government policy perspective they really do want to encourage. So for us, what do we have to think about? Well, this is a huge problem. All these adults don't have a bank account. They still have financial needs. Question is, are they exposed to criminals in times of difficulty? Can they not get access to anything other than by going to systems of Dawala or other forms of illegal lending? So what do? Technology can create certain things. Like, think about this: the traditional bank model. Person walks into a bank, talks to a banker, the bank looks in the vault, yeah, we've got the money, we want to do the deal, whatever. Well, actually, we fundamentally changed things by going to a peer-to-peer lending. And the access for peer-to-peer lending can be that we can have lots of benefits associated with that. In fact, the carbon footprint for many peer-to-peer lenders can be much lower because you don't have the same sort of brick and mortar costs, you don't have the same sort of challenges. You can reduce your barriers, you can have easier sign up, lower cost transfers, lower cost investments. These are things that are really good for individuals. So why does this matter from, you're solving small little problems in finance. And again, just to put out a statistic, think about how many people don't save for retirement, don't have any savings at all for retirement. There are a huge number. The CBC did a study a couple years ago and asked people how they were going to retire. 89% of people said they are going to retire because of CPP, or in the Quebec QPP. So that was the overwhelming majority. I think it was 34% said that their retirement plan involved winning the lottery. Now, that is both it's comical, but it's tragic, right? It's really tragic, because these are people that are just not going to have anything for retirement, that are going to live and not the greatest lives because they don't have that. We do have challenges within our financial system. We have a system that has very expensive, many would say overpriced products and services in Canada. Canadian market has some of the most expensive financial services in the world. They're not it's not because of quality, they're just because they're just massively expensive. If you go to the United States, you can sometimes spend 10% of the cost for a very similar financial product because of competition. But if you have a system where you don't have competition, if you make it difficult for people to open up new accounts or to transfer things, then people don't do it, right? So getting low cost investments, offering them things where they aren't being overcharged for their investments, reducing transaction fees, speed, and reducing switching costs is something else to really think about in terms of financial inclusion, getting easier access for people. These are things that are definitely very worth doing from the financial perspective to bring more people into having a bank account, having investments, opening up a cheap online investment system, giving them access to ETFs, like the exchange traded funds, a low cost alternative that just gives them access to something. It's perverse if you think about it. In our society, think about how hard it is to open up a simple ETF account, a simple account, which is really just, I want to buy the S&P 500, you know, very simple portfolio. And yet that's difficult to do. You need to come into the bank, you need to show your ID, you need to have an appointment, you need to do all these things. Or you need to go to the firm to do that for compliance reasons. But I can take you to any corner store, any gas station, and you can invest in the lottery. The casinos are open 24 hours a day, and that's the worst investment you can make. If you can even call it an investment. I mean, they call it gaming because it's just not in your favor, but we make it, the access to that is 24 hours a day. The access to the lottery is, you know, people are buying that regularly. And that is really, really unfortunate, because that small amount that those little old ladies that you see at the grocery stores, you know, handing in ticket after ticket after ticket, and I've seen that myself, very unfortunate, because what they should be doing is kind of socking that away so that they have a little extra to for other things in life. But we have to think about the policy perspective and how we could change that, how it fits in with this to help people make better decisions. How can we do that? And then again, think about this, access to justice for our last kind of area. Think about the perversion of this. This is from this is the United Nations. I've quoted this. This is the task force on justice called Justice for All. Globally, 5 billion people, 2/3 of the world's population, lack meaningful access to justice. More people don't have access to justice than have access to justice. Now, that's pretty breathtaking. And then you think, well, what happens in Canada, right? Are we different? Are we better? Are we worse? Well, we're not doing really well. So I looked at this issues that, you know, percentage of people experiencing one or more legal problems and the problem type. So people who experience, you know, debt problems, consumer complaints, employment issues, you're really looking at about 60% of people having one of these problems. And these are problems that can be solved. So the thing about law is that it tends to be process driven. There's a process of account opening, there's a process of assessment of a case, there's a process of these cases as they go forward. It's an interesting area to think about the application of AI to help with some of these common areas as well. That's the area where there's great power in thinking about, how do I utilize these new technologies to help people with these problems? Because these aren't just people, like, this is to say, these are people who have a legal problem, but they're not getting legal help for it. They're just recognizing they have a problem. There are many people that are fired or laid off that don't get help because they can't get, you know, if the legal fees are going to be more than what they would get back, then it doesn't make economic sense for them to go forward. So the utilization of AI and lower cost systems to give better access with reducing the challenges is something to really think carefully and hard about. And that's a lot of my time is spent doing that. So again, how do you start? How do we think about this? AI solutions, we need lots of data, but you know what? There's lots of public data out there. There's private data sets, there's public data sets. We have technology. I've given you one already today. You have to have an organization that's ready to do it and take it on. You have to have an understanding of the limitations, the benefits and the limitations of AI. And to think about, how do I do this in a way that creates a real project? because you can do something like this, but you won't be there. You won't get there. This is all you're doing. You need to really think about a basic feasibility study. Has anyone ever done a feasibility study? Very common with new businesses, new areas, to think about what's the feasibility study we have to focus on? Good. Melody, you have not done a feasibility study. Okay. Oh, you have done a feasibility. Oh, have Margaret has, Patience has. What did you do it for? What were you doing for the feasibility study? What were you working on? Was it a project at work, at school, or what was it? Anyone? Well, you find them a lot at with new businesses. Within business, they're always doing it. So a feasibility study, we want to think about our projects successfully. Like, we don't just want to start projects. There are lots of AI projects that were started that are a gigantic waste of time and resources, right? Why is that? They were too slow. They used the wrong technology. They found out that what they were doing was illegal. Or sometimes, the acronym they use is LETS. So is it legal? Is it economic? Do we have the technology available to do it? And last, S, is scheduling. How long will this take? Where many early AI projects fell down was really just in scheduling and figuring out how long is it going to take to get this done. Are we using the right technology? There are many people that were programming in Python and doing lots of good work, and then all of a sudden they were blown away by new developments, whether that's Gemini or ChatGPT or others. So understanding the technology, understanding the application, to really think about that is something that is very, very important. To think about how do we get it done? How do we get it done in a quick enough time frame? Many of the projects that used to take a year or 6 months or more, these are things that are being done very, very quickly now. Very, very fast projects to test them, to bring them forward, because that's the unbelievable power that AI brings to us now. And so I would just turn it around to kind of open it up to say, thinking about your purpose, imagine you're doing think about the thing that you care most about, the area of the SDG that you care about. You want to focus on sustainability. Maybe it's climate action. Maybe it's cleaning up plastics in Lake Ontario. Maybe it's having a better community, getting access to capital for small business, reducing the costs of financial inclusion. From a policy perspective, we should make good things for our community easier to do, and we should make bad things harder to do. So maybe we need to, allow the casinos to close, and maybe we need to open up more access to 24-hour online investments. Maybe we need to change the incentives associated with that as well. So think about this. What would be what you'd call a good AI application? And oftentimes it may help you to think about this. Imagine you're thinking about climate action. What can you do? You want to have a measurable result. You have to encourage a reduction in maybe fossil fuels or the use of coal. Maybe you want to measure it in certain areas so that you can think about, hey, I need to know that if that this company that I've worked with has reduced their carbon footprint by 10%. Needs to be measurable. So we need to think about performance. Like, are we actually not just talking about doing good, talking about doing the right thing, but are we actually achieving this? Is our result material in that way? And then think about the environment that we'd be operating in, whether that is it online? Is it on your phone? Is it on the blockchain? Are we using different tools? Like, what could we use to think about this? What data would we need to think about this, to explore that? Because it's great to have an idea about having an AI application, but if we can't get the data, we really can't do it. And then think about the people who are involved, the processes that might be involved, the incentives that might be involved, and then focus on thinking about the benefits that you're trying to achieve from that. So I can tell you that focus on like the application of legal aspects. So reducing the costs, the costs associated with bringing a claim for justice forward, giving greater access, giving online access to people, giving better hours of access for people to try and achieve their results are real things that have a real impact. Now, to do that, I need to utilize technology. You can't do it the same way. You need to have better, better, cheaper ways of doing things if you want to provide a better, cheaper method of providing those services, whether those are financial services, legal services, accounting services, anything like that. You have to think carefully about what tools you would want to bring forward to do just that. So I'm hopeful that someone sitting there has a great idea, wants to make a difference, and can put this together in a way that will change the world. So that is my hope. And if you do have an idea like that, I want you to contact me because I want to help you achieve that too. Okay. With that, those are some of the questions that, some of the basics to give you an idea of how you might go about starting. Also, you should talk to each other. The people that are sitting on this call and watching this, talk to each other, get together in groups, focus on this. It is a very, very important area to increase sustainability. We have this unique opportunity to solve some of these big problems, but it's going to take good, hard work from like-minded people that are interested in using AI for sustainability and not just for pure profit in all cases. I think that you can do both, that it is a very powerful combination to achieve the sustainability goals as well as the economic benefit. So you think about that imagine those that plastic island sitting out there in the middle of the Pacific, larger than Texas. Now imagine that garbage island, if all of a sudden we could turn that into an asset. It wasn't a liability anymore, but it was just an asset. We could turn it into something. We could take it, pull it out of the water. That plastic island would be eaten away, right? We wouldn't have them anymore. People would be out there trying to mine or harvest those plastic islands. And that is something that is definitely worth doing. Now, I think to do it, you're going to have to utilize new technologies, including AI, to achieve that result. Okay. With that, thank you very much for listening to me. These are just some ideas. I'd like to share some ideas of some of the things that I'm working on and how I think that it can make a difference in the long run. But I really encourage you to explore it together and get into groups, talk to like-minded people, find them, and work on a project. Just try. The best thing you can do is just try to see what you could come up with. And I have always been really surprised by many students coming up with brilliant ideas. And also look for friends and allies, because today you may see only walls and barriers. I guarantee you, day by day, each day we get closer to 2030 and missing all those sustainability targets, I guarantee you're going to find more and more friends and allies along the way. Okay. So thanks very much, and I'm open to any questions you have, or I'll just let you go and have a great rainy day sitting around, drinking coffee, whatever you prefer.
John, I just want to thank you. That was a really, really great presentation. Really made us all think. Certainly, we definitely need to focus in on the execution, the implementation piece. I love the fact, focus, measurable, impact. We need to take an idea and we actually need to do something with it. And you gave us so many great discussion points. Just one quick question, and I know we're cognizant of time. When we're thinking about our financial system, we're thinking about our legal system, we ourselves can create tools. How do we go about making change at the government level, right? Because I would think that many of the reasons why we don't have access to justice are because some of the systems in place in a particular country or particular region. Any ideas on what we can do there? Like, is that the role of the UN? Is that lobbying? How do we bridge that gap?
Well, it's a great question. It's all fronts. So if you're creating a tool to solve a particular problem, that's one thing. But there's also policy, and there's also making an important development in certain areas. One of the challenges, like I'll give you an example in law. So law had a big problem because, and so did finance, same problem, that if you wanted a client, you'd have to meet them face to face. So then the question would be, well, how do you meet all these people when, you know, if your offices are closed down? In fact, the pandemic did us a big favor.
Sure.
It opened up our eyes to the fact that people need the ability to get access to these tools online. So now you can, and now the lawyers, one of the slowest groups, the law societies, things like that, have been slow to implement that. But now you can have a lawyer and you can have never met them before. Now you will meet them online. You will meet them and you'll have AML, like anti-money laundering and other safety checks to make sure that you're providing good service. But the truth is, people are saying, oh, that's such a big deal. In fact, there have been lots and lots of problems with anti-money laundering and other challenges with lawyers for years, okay? There are many transactions that should have been red flagged by law firms that weren't. Now they have to get serious about it. So the interesting part is lawyers and financial institutions are actually considered quite similar from the perspective of how they're regulated now and the requirements of identification of your clients and things like that. So yes, that change in law made a massive difference. It has changed how we can operate, where we can operate, what we can do. So you are absolutely right that the law must cohere with that. And in the same way that, when we're thinking about some of the most powerful tools we have, the most powerful tool we have is to think about what investments we make. How do we invest?
Yeah.
And so now, as Professor Young was just mentioning, now, investment committees are entitled, in fact, they're required to think about climate risk in their portfolios. Now that's a big change, right? Fiduciary obligations didn't used to be that way. Fiduciary obligations and the law associated with this is changing because we're recognizing that the old way of doing things just didn't give us the results we wanted. Just we're not getting the kind of world we want. We're not getting the access we want. We're not making these good decisions. We're having, like we're having a really nasty environmental and social and governance issues. Like look, 22 million pounds of plastics go into the Great Lakes every year. Most of it never leaves. We're poisoning the greatest natural resource potentially in the world, the world's largest freshwater source, and we're poisoning it systematically. Now that's tragic, and if we are getting these results because we're not dealing with pollution, we're not dealing with the waste that is produced by some of these economic activities, then we need to really consider how we close the loop. And that may be we change the way we're thinking about it. We change how we're invest. We change the cost of capital for some of this. We change the responsibility, the liability for individuals to clean that stuff up. I mean, there are many companies that have a great debt for the future to pay with respect to just plastics alone. I mean, you could go on from there, but there are many that have they've made a really profound impact for no particularly good reason on our environment. So I think that as judgment changes, I think that changes as well. And recognize that, look, we're getting to a point now of the way people are thinking about this, the way they're recognizing these problems, And in the democracies of the world, we have the ability to change things for the future, to make different decisions, to make different policies going forward. Unfortunately, we've been subject to short-term thinking, and we've been susceptible to the long-term trends by just focusing on the next 3 years or the next 2 years, next 4 years in the United States. But that hasn't really captured the fact that we really needed to look for the next 40. We needed to look like out further to think about solving some of these big problems, because the problems they didn't occur in 3 years. It was the gradual development of some of these insidious problems of too much waste, too much plastics, too much carbon in our atmosphere that make us, probably we just have to do things in a different way. Now, I'm still hopeful that there's really there's a place for people, innovators and entrepreneurs to make a significant contribution in this way to help reduce some of those problems without kind of draconian response. But I think I'm hopeful for the future that bright people with the right ideas can turn that from a liability into an asset, in the same way that, think about it, for years and years and years, there were people, the turkey farmers and chicken farmers, paid someone to come and clean up the waste at their farms. And then that person had a sign on the side of their truck that said waste. And they'd drive away and they would pull off that sticker and then they'd slap on biofuel, right? And then they sold it to other people. And I'm hopeful that with the same sort of thinking, we can do more of that. I think that that's the kind of opportunity going forward in general. So great question, and thank you very much.
Well, thanks, John. We really appreciate it. As
Yeah.
a segue, our next session is on April 25th, where we'll be talking about AI applications in education, another really interesting field. We hope you can join us. It'll be scheduled from 12, same thing, 12 till about 1:30. So again, thank you, John. Thank you to all of our participants online. We look forward to seeing you at future sessions, and bye for now.
Thank you. I can see you, Maureen. We're being